There's a moment, a silent, almost imperceptible split-second decision you make when someone calls you out. It could be a subtle insinuation in a casual conversation, a direct accusation in a heated argument, or even a perceived slight that triggers an internal alarm. Someone questions your worth, your character, your intent, your competence. And in that precise, visceral moment, the average person does what they were instinctively trained to do, what society has conditioned them to believe is the right thing. They defend themselves. They scramble for explanations, for justifications, for evidence to prove their innocence, their good intentions, their blamelessness. They believe with an almost childlike faith that by clarifying, by explaining, by reasoning, by presenting their side of the story, they will somehow disarm the accusation, restore their untarnished reputation, and regain control of the narrative. They operate under the naive assumption that truth, if articulated loudly and logically enough, will always prevail, that reason will triumph over malice or misunderstanding. They've been taught that honesty and transparency are the ultimate shields, that integrity is its own defense. But this conventional wisdom, this deeply ingrained, almost involuntary reflex to defend, is precisely what leaves you vulnerable, exposed, and ultimately disempowered. You've felt it, haven't you? That sickening knot in your stomach, the sudden rush of adrenaline, the racing heart, the desperate, almost frantic urge to set the record straight, to correct the perceived injustice. It's a primal response, a deep-seated fear of being misunderstood, of being judged unfairly, of having your reputation tarnished. And make no mistake, it is a trap. A psychological snare that ensnares countless individuals, draining their power and leaving them at the mercy of their accusers. This isn't just about minor disagreements. It's about the fundamental dynamics of human interaction, where every perceived challenge can become a battle for status, influence, and control. But to Machiavelli, the Florentine master of power, that moment of reflexive defense is not just a misstep. It's the moment you lose everything. It's a strategic capitulation, because the second you launch into a defense, you implicitly admit you're weak enough to need to. You validate the premise of the accusation. You concede that the accuser's judgment holds enough weight to demand a response from you. You step willingly into their frame, onto their chosen battlefield, and you begin to play by their rules, on their terms. In the ruthless, unforgiving arena of power dynamics, perception is not just important, it is everything. It is the currency of influence, the foundation of authority. If they see you flinch, if they see you scramble, if they see you desperately trying to justify yourself, they don't see a victim. They don't see someone unfairly maligned. They see blood in the water. They see an opening. They see confirmation of their power over you, a clear signal that their words have struck a nerve, that their attack has landed. This is the brutal, unvarnished law Machiavelli understood before anyone else, a truth that cuts against the grain of conventional morality and social conditioning. The very act of defense, far from protecting you, actively diminishes your standing. It signals insecurity, not integrity. It reveals a desperate, almost pathetic need for external validation, rather than an unshakable inner conviction. It transforms you from the accused into the supplicant, begging for absolution, for understanding, for mercy from those who seek to undermine you. Your defense becomes their victory, your explanation their proof of your vulnerability. It's a self-inflicted wound in the silent war for dominance. Let's get one thing straight and internalize this truth. Defending yourself rarely, if ever, convinces anyone who truly matters. Those who are already against you will twist your words, and those who are for you don't need your explanations. What your defense does achieve, however, is a profound shift of power away from you, handing it directly, unequivocally, to your accuser. The strong, the truly powerful, they understand this fundamental dynamic. They let the silence burn. They let the accusation float untouched in the air, like a phantom limb, an echo with no source, because they know the real move, the truly Machiavellian maneuver, is this. Turn the accusation into a mirror. Force the accuser to confront their own motives, their own projections, their own insecurities. Make them doubt themselves, not you. When you refuse to engage on their terms, when you meet their aggression, their insinuation, their outright attack with an unyielding stillness, a calm, almost serene indifference, you force them to grapple with their own aggression. Their attack, deprived of a target, loses its momentum. Their carefully crafted narrative of your supposed guilt or inadequacy dissipates into the void of your non-response. They are left grappling with their own aggression, their own uncertainty, their own unfulfilled expectation of a fight. The immediate psychological impact on them is profound. They expect a struggle, a justification, a plea for understanding, a desperate attempt to salvage your image. When they receive none of that, when their attack is met with an impenetrable wall of composure, their carefully constructed assault crumbles, their momentum dissipates. This isn't about emotional weakness or seeking validation. This is about pure, unadulterated strategy, about ruthless control, and about the unwavering preservation of your power and psychological sovereignty. It is a psychological judo throw using their own aggressive force against them, causing them to stumble and fall without you lifting a finger. You don't just avoid losing. You win by refusing to play their game. You command respect not by proving your innocence, but by demonstrating your utter indifference to their judgment. Your silence becomes your loudest statement, your stillness your most potent weapon. It's a declaration of self-possession that few can withstand. Why do most people instinctively defend themselves? It stems from a deeply ingrained, almost noble desire to be understood. They crave clarity, validation, and the comforting yet often illusory belief that if they just explain themselves thoroughly enough, if they just present their side with enough logical precision and emotional sincerity, others will inevitably see their truth, recognize their good intentions, and acknowledge their blamelessness. They operate under the assumption that the world is a rational place, a courtroom where truth always wins, where facts speak for themselves. But that belief, while emotionally appealing, comes from a place of profound psychological weakness, not strategic acumen. You don't want clarity, you want control. Clarity is for therapy, for self-reflection, for personal growth. Control, however, is for power, for influence, for navigating the treacherous waters of human interaction. The Machiavellian operator understands that the world is not a courtroom, it's an arena. It's a stage where perception is not just reality, but the only reality that matters, and where the control of the narrative is paramount. When you defend, you are implicitly accepting the accuser's narrative as valid enough to warrant a response. You are, in essence, validating their authority to judge you. You are ceding the high ground, stepping down from your position of detached authority to engage in a petty squabble. The profound psychological truth, often uncomfortable to confront, is that people rarely listen to understand. They listen to confirm their existing biases, to find weaknesses, or to gather ammunition for their next attack. Your defense, no matter how meticulously crafted, how logically sound, or how emotionally sincere, often serves only to provide more leverage, more angles for attack, more perceived admissions of guilt. It's a psychological judo flip. By refusing to engage, by denying them the satisfaction of your reaction, you deny them the leverage they seek. You force them to grapple with their own projections, their own need to control you, their own unfulfilled desire for a reaction. This isn't about being right in some objective moral sense. It's about being unassailable, about maintaining your strategic advantage, about preserving your psychological capital. It's about understanding that the moment you feel compelled to explain, you've already lost a crucial piece of your power. The truly powerful do not explain. They simply are. Let's bring this abstract principle into the concrete reality of everyday life. Imagine this common scenario. You walk into a room, perhaps a social gathering, a casual work event, or even a family dinner. Someone, perhaps subtly, perhaps overtly, throws shade. It could be a backhanded compliment, a thinly veiled criticism, a dismissive comment designed to undermine your status or confidence. The conventional, socially conditioned response is to retort, to explain, to defend your honor, to justify your actions or presence. But the Machiavellian operator, the individual who understands the true dynamics of power, does something else entirely. They do nothing. They say nothing. No defense, no retaliation, no smirk, no visible sign of being affected. Just calm, total stillness. Let the comment hang in the air, unanswered, unacknowledged, like a bad odor that no one wants to claim. In that moment, you become untouchable. Their aggression, deprived of a target, bounces off you and reflects back onto them. The onlookers, those silent observers who are always judging, always assessing, will instinctively sense the imbalance. Who is truly powerful here? The one who needs to attack, who needs to diminish others to feel significant, or the one who doesn't even acknowledge the attack, who remains unperturbed? The answer becomes self-evident. The accuser is exposed as petty, insecure, and desperate for attention, while you radiate an aura of quiet confidence and unshakable self-possession. Or consider a slightly more direct accusation, perhaps from a colleague questioning your commitment to a project or your work ethic. Instead of launching into a detailed, exhaustive explanation of your hours, your efforts, your sacrifices, simply meet their gaze with a calm, steady look. Perhaps a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging their words without validating their premise. And then pivot the conversation smoothly to a different, unrelated topic, or even better, ask them a pointed question about their own work, shifting the spotlight back onto them. The key is to deny them the satisfaction of your reaction, to starve their aggression of the fuel it needs to burn. Your non-engagement is not weakness. It is a calculated, strategic move that communicates a profound message. Your words have no power over me. Your opinion is irrelevant. This is the foundational application of the principle, the art of non-engagement, the strategic silence that speaks volumes. Now let us delve into the truly colder or elite moves, strategies that transcend mere non-engagement and actively manipulate the psychological landscape to your advantage. These are the tactics that differentiate the true Machiavellian operator from the novice. The first is the art of inversion. Imagine this. Someone hurls an accusation at you, perhaps calling you manipulative, calculating, or even ruthless. The average person would recoil, vehemently deny, and launch into a passionate defense of their character, but the Machiavellian operator does something far more potent. They invert the accusation. Instead of denying, they might offer a slight, almost imperceptible smile, a calm, steady gaze, and then utter a phrase like, "If that's how you choose to see it," or, "I understand why you might perceive it that way." This is not an admission of guilt. It is a profound, almost devastating dismissal. It's a subtle, yet powerful transfer of the burden of proof back to them. You are not denying, you are not confirming, you are simply acknowledging their perception as their problem, their interpretation, not yours. The psychological mechanism at play here is devastatingly effective. It disarms their attack by refusing to validate its premise. They expect you to fight, to argue, to defend your honor. When you don't, when you meet their aggression with an unruffled acceptance of their flawed perception, their accusation loses its power, becoming a mere reflection of their own biases, their own insecurities, their own limited understanding. Their carefully constructed narrative of your supposed flaw crumbles, leaving them exposed and disoriented. They are left to grapple with the uncomfortable realization that their attack had no effect, that their words hold no sway over you. This is a profound act of psychological judo, using their own aggressive energy to destabilize them. It forces them to question their own judgment, their own motives, their own reality. You have, in essence, turned their weapon back on them without ever touching it. Another elite move is the preemptive non-defense. This is a more sophisticated strategy, requiring foresight and a keen understanding of potential threats. If you anticipate an accusation, a criticism, or a negative narrative forming around you, Instead of waiting for it to materialize and then reacting, you subtly introduce a counter-narrative, a framing that renders the potential accusation irrelevant before it's even voiced. For example, if you know someone might accuse you of being overly ambitious or self-serving, instead of waiting for that charge to be leveled, you might subtly and consistently frame your actions as being driven by a deep commitment to the team's success, an unwavering focus on results, or a genuine desire for excellence that benefits everyone. You don't address the accusation directly, you redefine the terms of engagement. You don't defend your ambition, you recontextualize it as a virtue. This is not about truth in a moral sense. It's about narrative control, about shaping the perception before the battle even begins. It's about orchestrating the psychological environment, not merely reacting to it. This requires a proactive, strategic mindset, a constant awareness of how your actions and words are being perceived, and a willingness to subtly guide that perception in your favor. It's about building an impenetrable fortress of perception around yourself, brick by carefully placed brick, long before any siege is laid. Let's apply these principles to a diverse range of real-world contexts, demonstrating their universal applicability. Consider a high-stakes business meeting, a crucible of ambition and subtle power plays. Someone, perhaps a rival, subtly undermines you. They might question your data, imply a lack of experience, or casually mention a past minor misstep. The average professional, driven by a need to prove their competence, would jump to defend their expertise, to cite sources, to meticulously explain their methodology. But the Machiavellian operator, the true master of the corporate arena, he leans back. He waits. He allows the insinuation to hang in the air, allowing it to expose the accuser's own insecurity, their own agenda, their own desperation. He might even offer a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, as if privy to a deeper, more profound game being played. Then, with an unhurried calm, he steers the conversation back to the core objective of the meeting, or perhaps asks a pointed, insightful question that subtly redirects scrutiny onto the accuser's own contributions or lack thereof. He doesn't engage in the petty squabble. He elevates the discourse, making the accuser's attack seem small, irrelevant, and unprofessional in comparison. This is not about winning an argument. It's about winning the perception of leadership and control. Now, let's shift to the intensely personal, often emotionally charged realm of romantic or personal relationships. This is where the principle of non-defense becomes even more dangerous and therefore even more potent. Imagine your partner, in a moment of emotional reactivity or insecurity, hurls an accusation. "You don't care about me anymore," or "You're always so selfish." The instinct, fueled by love and a desire for harmony, is to launch into a passionate, exhaustive defense, listing all the ways you do care, all the sacrifices you've made, all the evidence of your affection. But the strategic response, the Machiavellian response, is different. It's not about coldness, but about control. You might respond with a calm, empathetic tone. "I understand why you might feel that way," or "That's not how I see it, but I hear your pain." You acknowledge their emotion without validating the accusation. You create a psychological space for them to reflect on their own feelings, their own projections, rather than forcing you into a defensive posture. This shifts the dynamic from an emotional battle, where you are constantly reacting, to a strategic negotiation, where you retain control of your narrative and your emotional state. You are not denying their feelings, but you are refusing to accept the premise of their attack. This subtle shift can disarm emotional outbursts, forcing the other person to take responsibility for their own emotional landscape, rather than projecting it onto you. It's a powerful way to maintain your emotional sovereignty in the face of emotional manipulation or reactive behavior. Even in the chaotic, often anonymous landscape of online interactions, where a barrage of negative comments, false accusations, or outright slander can feel overwhelming, the principle holds. Your instinct might be to engage, to correct every falsehood, to defend your reputation against every troll. But the Machiavellian approach is to meet this digital onslaught not with a lengthy, impassioned rebuttal, but with a single dismissive statement, or even better, with complete and utter silence. Your lack of engagement starves the trolls of the attention they crave, the fuel that ignites their fire. It signals to a discerning audience, those who are truly watching and assessing, that you are above the fray, that their petty attacks are beneath your notice. A single, well-placed, non-defensive comment can often be more devastating than 1,000 words of justification. For example, if accused of something online, a simple, "I'll let my work speak for itself," or "my focus remains on positive objective," can be far more impactful than a detailed refutation. This demonstrates a profound understanding of how perception operates in the digital age. Attention is currency, and by denying them your attention, you deny them their power. You control the narrative by refusing to participate in their destructive one. The world, from childhood, teaches you to defend your reputation, to explain yourself, to clear your name, to prove your innocence. It instills in you the belief that truth will set you free, that transparency is always the best policy. But Machiavelli, with his cold, calculating gaze, saw the profound trap embedded within this conventional wisdom. He knew that the moment you chase innocence, you implicitly admit guilt. The very act of seeking to prove your blamelessness suggests that there was, in fact, something to be guilty of in the first place. Won't I be seen as cruel? Is this manipulative? Am I being dishonest? These are the common objections, the moral qualms, the deeply ingrained societal conditioning that prevents most individuals from adopting this profoundly effective strategy. These questions arise from a framework of conventional morality, a framework that the Machiavellian operator transcends. But reframe them. Is it cruel to protect your energy, your peace of mind, your strategic advantage? Is it manipulative to control your own narrative, to refuse to be drawn into battles that serve only your opponent? Is it dishonest to refuse to engage with a false premise? The goal, from a Machiavellian perspective, isn't likability, it's effectiveness. It's about preserving your power, your peace, and your strategic advantage in a world that is inherently competitive and often adversarial. It's about understanding that your primary duty is to yourself, to your objectives, to your sovereignty. The common pitfalls when attempting to implement these tactics are numerous and often subtle. The most prevalent is over-explaining when you do decide to engage. The moment you offer too much information, too many details, you provide more ammunition, more angles for attack. Another pitfall is allowing emotion to dictate your response. The Machiavellian operator understands that every word, every reaction, every gesture is a strategic move. The moment you react emotionally, with anger, frustration, defensiveness, or even excessive eagerness to please, you lose control. You reveal a vulnerability that can be exploited. The moment you feel compelled to justify, to seek approval, to explain away, you've already conceded crucial ground. This isn't about being a stone statue, devoid of human emotion. It's about choosing your battles with surgical precision, and often, the most powerful battle is the one you refuse to fight altogether. It's about understanding that your silence, your composure, your unyielding refusal to engage on their terms is a far more potent weapon than any defense you could ever articulate. The world will always accuse, always judge, always seek to diminish. The master of power doesn't try to change the world, he changes his response to it. He understands that the external world is merely a reflection of his internal state, and by controlling his internal state, he controls his external reality. This is the ultimate form of self-mastery, a profound psychological discipline that few are willing to undertake, but which yields unparalleled dividends in power and influence. It is the path of the truly sovereign individual, who understands that their worth is not derived from external validation, but from an unshakable inner conviction. Let us now bring this profound journey to its culmination, by reiterating the core principle and unveiling the paradoxical wisdom that underpins it. Most people, trapped in the conventional paradigm, believe that power is about proving yourself, about winning arguments, about meticulously demonstrating your righteousness and blamelessness. They are convinced that if they can just articulate their truth with enough force and clarity, they will prevail. But Machiavelli, with his piercing, unsentimental gaze, would not only smirk at this notion, he would outright dismiss it as a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature and power dynamics. Because the second you try to prove anything, you've already made a critical concession. You've implicitly declared the other person's judgment, their accusation, their opinion, valid enough to warrant your effort, your time, your emotional energy. You've handed them the gavel, granting them the authority to be your judge, jury, and executioner. You've entered their frame, on their terms, and by doing so, you've already lost. Herein lies the profound paradox, a truth that is as uncomfortable as it is liberating. The more you explain yourself, the more alone you look. The more you chase validation, the more you signal your insecurity, your desperate need for external approval. True power, the kind that radiates effortlessly and commands genuine respect, isn't about convincing others. It's about being so self-contained, so unshakable in your own reality, so utterly indifferent to external opinions, that those opinions become utterly irrelevant. The Machiavellian truth, stark and unyielding, is that the very need to defend is a profound weakness, a vulnerability that skilled operators, and indeed the world itself, will ruthlessly exploit. Your silence, your calm, your unyielding refusal to engage in the petty squabbles of justification, becomes a towering testament to your inner fortress, to your unassailable self-possession. It's a profound, almost spiritual detachment from the need for external approval, a radical acceptance of your own sovereignty. This is the ultimate counterintuitive wisdom. The less you care about being understood, the more you are respected. The less you chase, the more you attract. The less you defend, the more powerful you become. It is the power of irrelevance, rendering the accuser's words, and indeed the accuser themselves, irrelevant to your state of being. The final evolution of this principle is not merely silence, nor is it just strategic non-engagement. It is something far more profound, far more transformative. It is aura. Imagine a presence so composed, so secure in its own being, so utterly unperturbed by the external noise of accusations, criticisms, and attempts to diminish, that those attacks simply evaporate before they even land. They find no purchase, no point of entry, no resonance. This is the aura of the unassailable. It is the vision of your transformed state if you consistently apply these principles, if you truly internalize the Machiavellian wisdom of non-defense. You will walk into any room, any situation, and radiate an unshakable calm, a quiet confidence that needs no external validation. Accusations, criticisms, attempts to undermine you, they simply bounce off, finding no purchase, no point of entry. This isn't about arrogance. It's about an internal state of being that is so robust, so self-sufficient, so impervious to external attack that it projects an almost tangible field of invincibility. This power comes not from brute force, not from aggressive counterattacks, and certainly not from emotional reactivity. It comes from internal shifts, from a meticulous, strategic design of your own psychological landscape. You become a fortress, not by building higher walls, but by making your interior so solid, so self-sufficient, so deeply rooted in your own truth that no external force can breach it. You command respect effortlessly, not because you demand it, not because you fight for it, but because your very presence signifies it. Your composure in the face of provocation, your unyielding stillness, your serene indifference to the petty games of others becomes your most compelling argument, your most potent form of communication. This is the transformation. From a reactive individual constantly defending their position, constantly explaining their existence, to a strategic master who dictates the terms of engagement simply by refusing to engage on anyone else's terms. You move from being a pawn in someone else's game to becoming the grandmaster of your own. And that, my friends, is when power becomes truly effortless, a natural extension of your being. Machiavelli, the pragmatic genius, didn't care about being good in the conventional sense. He cared about being effective. He cared about being in control. And the one who never defends is always, always in control of perception, even when surrounded by lies, even when the world clamors for an explanation, even when every fiber of your being screams to justify. This isn't a mere trick you pull once and then forget. It's a mindset you cultivate, a discipline you embody, a way of being that permeates every interaction. It doesn't happen overnight. This is not a quick fix, a magic pill for instant power. You build it like a fortress, stone by painstaking stone, through consistent practice and unwavering commitment. By acting with restraint when every impulse screams for reaction. By choosing stillness over emotional reactivity. By understanding that the game of power is played not with words, not with justifications, but with presence, with an unshakable inner core. This principle of non-defense is but one, albeit foundational, piece in a vast arsenal of strategic wisdom. The journey to true self-mastery, to navigating the complex, often treacherous landscape of human interactions with effortless power and profound insight is an ongoing one. There are deeper levels of understanding, further applications, and more uncomfortable truths waiting to be uncovered, waiting for those brave enough to seek them. Continue to question the conventional, continue to observe the hidden dynamics, and continue to refine your strategic mind. The world is a stage, and most are merely reacting to the script handed to them, playing their parts without question. But you, the discerning few, you can learn to write your own. You can become the architect of your own reality, the master of your own narrative, the sovereign of your own domain. The choice is yours. Remain a pawn in someone else's narrative, constantly defending your existence, or become the unassailable fortress, the silent force, the one who never defends, and therefore never loses. This is the path of true power. This is the Machiavellian way. And the journey, for those willing to embark, has only just begun. What other uncomfortable truths are you ready to confront? What other illusions are you ready to shatter? The answers await those who dare to look beyond the obvious, beyond the conventional, beyond the need to defend. Embrace the stillness. Embrace the power. Embrace the silence. Your transformation begins now. Let's delve even deeper into the practical application of these Machiavellian principles, exploring scenarios where the stakes are higher and the psychological games more intricate. Consider the realm of public opinion and reputation management. In today's hyper-connected world, a single accusation, a viral rumor, or a cleverly crafted smear campaign can decimate a person's standing overnight. The conventional advice is to issue a swift, comprehensive denial, to present irrefutable evidence, to engage in a public relations battle to clear one's name. But the Machiavellian operator understands that such a response often amplifies the accusation, giving it more oxygen and validating its existence. Instead, they might employ a strategy of strategic silence, allowing the initial furor to burn itself out, understanding that the public's attention span is fleeting. Or they might subtly shift the narrative by focusing on a new positive initiative, drawing attention away from the negative without ever acknowledging it directly. This is not about deception, it's about controlling the flow of information and the focus of public perception. The absence of a defensive reaction can often be more powerful than any denial, as it signals a profound indifference to the accuser's attempts to control the narrative. It communicates, without uttering a single word, that the accusation is beneath your notice, that it lacks the substance to warrant a response from someone of your stature. Another advanced application lies in the art of negotiation. When faced with an aggressive negotiator who attempts to undermine your position or question your integrity, the natural inclination is to defend your proposals, to justify your demands, to prove the fairness of your stance. However, A Machiavellian approach would involve refusing to defend your position. Instead, you might calmly reiterate your terms, perhaps with a slight, almost imperceptible increase in your demands, or a subtle shift in your offer that makes the other party's aggression seem counterproductive. By not defending, you force them to engage with the substance of your offer rather than the emotional charge of their own attack. You subtly communicate that their attempts at intimidation are ineffective and that you are operating from a position of unshakable strength and clarity. This can be particularly effective in situations where the other party expects you to be reactive, as your non-reaction disrupts their anticipated script and forces them to adapt to your unyielding composure. It's a psychological disequilibrium that often leads them to concede simply to regain a sense of control and predictability in the negotiation. Furthermore, consider the subtle power dynamics within organizations. When a subordinate questions your decision or a peer subtly challenges your authority, the reflex is to explain your rationale, to justify your leadership. But the Machiavellian leader understands that true authority is not explained. It is simply exerted. Instead of defending, they might simply reiterate the decision with an air of finality, or perhaps ask a probing question that forces the challenger to articulate their own flawed assumptions. This reinforces their position without engaging in a defensive posture that could be perceived as weakness. It communicates that your decisions are not open for debate, not because you are autocratic, but because they are the product of a superior strategic mind. This is about cultivating an aura of decisive competence, where your actions speak louder than any words of justification. The less you explain, the more profound your authority appears. The less you defend, the more unassailable your position becomes. This is the essence of Machiavellian leadership, not to be loved, but to be respected and to be feared, not for cruelty, but for an unyielding strategic mastery that leaves no room for doubt or challenge. This constant, subtle reinforcement of your unassailable position through the deliberate absence of defense builds an impenetrable psychological barrier around you, making you a formidable force in any arena. It is a continuous, almost imperceptible act of psychological warfare, waged not with aggression, but with the quiet, devastating power of non-reaction.